Namaste. Mhm. So we make a big leap this time, going from book one in The Life Divine as it was released in 1939 to book two, The Knowledge and the Ignorance, the Spiritual Evolution, as he says, recast and enlarged in 1940. And having set the stage with his view of what an omnipresent reality is and how that being manifests, makes itself clear, reveals itself through a graded order of worlds, from the darkness of matter to the super brilliance of the supramental and beyond, is the first step. He will recapitulate and frequently return to his subject. But in this section, he has to explain further how it is that this evolution is not a rapid outflowering of what we say is a universally present divinity. How is it that we have to deal with an evolution which has to have such a rocky road to travel? So, in part one, which he calls the infinite consciousness and the ignorance, he opens with two brand new chapters, which were not part of the Life Divine as it was expounded in the Aria. As he had a chance to stop and ponder, as he was recovering from his accident in November 1938 and was asked by Mother to take up the Life Divine and turned it into a book. The first volume had come out. As he noted later, he wasn't happy altogether with it because he felt that if he had taken time to expand it farther, he could have done a better job and filled out the argument. So this first chapter, you might say, is addressing some of those issues. Because in the early chapters of what we call book one, as he's setting the stage, talking about the nature of being, the nature of consciousness, etc., he felt that he had not touched upon every theme that he needed to make it clear what is the solution to the contradictions that beset us here in our workaday cosmos. So he comes to it here in this chapter one, indeterminates, cosmic determinations, and the indeterminable. Now, as always, we're just going to touch on, we're going to put forward some of the leading ideas. If I were to say we were going to tease out the ideas, I don't mean tease in a jocular way. I would mean that we're combing them out as you would card wool. We're getting down to the fine nature of things here. So, indeterminates, and then from these indeterminates, what is determined to be cosmic? And then what is the nature of that which is indeterminable? So we begin where we sort of left off, that there is an existence. It is. He asserts, and remember, Sri Aurobindo is a realist. He is a realist when it comes to what is transcendent. He is a realist when it comes to the universe. He is a realist when it comes to the individual moving in the universe, both of whom express terms of the transcendent nature or supernature, or what can we say of it? So, if there is a real existence, as he has said, following the Vedantic idea of Satchit Ananda, this is an existence who is conscious of its own being, of its own infinite being. It is, in fact, infinitely conscious of its own being. So, how does this conscious force apply itself to universal being? In some of the same ways that you would find other paradoxes in nature. Consciousness force becomes knowledge and ignorance, just as the supreme existence, Sat, becomes what seems to be nescient matter. And so we have to appraise our beginnings in this way. We start from a nescience. What does not know? What does not seem to exist? What unity has become blown to smithereens at the base of the cosmos. And now, if we're going to have unity again, we have to reconstruct it. And if we're going to have knowledge again, to simulate or recapture here what is above in consciousness force, Chit Shakti, we will have to evolve it. And we have to begin literally from the nothing, from the first manifestations of the inconscient. So we have to evolve a phenomenal knowledge. This is a paradox. If this being is indeterminate in the sense that there are no boundaries, that its consciousness is not merely vast, it is infinite. So there's nothing bordering it. We can't use terms like space and time on that which transcends space and time. So we derive a universe from that somehow, which we can confirm in our deepest spiritual experience and declare that the universe is a boundless finite. We don't know what the boundaries might be, but we understand that somehow this universe is a breathing forth, a manifestation, a making clear of what is beyond our reach. And that consciousness that puts forth the universe, that expresses it, does so not from compulsion, but from self-determination. And as it is the ultimately real, whatever it cognizes is also real. So what forms, what fashions, what infuses knowledge into the cosmos is a real idea because it comes from reality. Sri Aurobindo identifies the manifestation of real ideas as occurring within the unitive consciousness of the supramental. And the supramental is itself a radiation, an organizing agency within the supreme reality of Satchit Ananda. There is no boundary. But if it wants to articulate itself, its voice is the supramental. If it wants to fashion itself into form, it uses the force and will, which are instinct and the knowledge of the supramental. And this is all above. But the real idea is operative secretly, even in matter. As Sri Aurobindo has said, reality is omnipresent. Everything is present everywhere. Essentially, invisibly to our physical eyes, but there. But it is confirmable only in a growing inner experience. And we have sometimes to learn not outside how the universe operates, but inside how the inner cosmos operates. There is the shell, the vision looking out, and then there's the internal reality. There's an external cosmos, there is an internal cosmos. There is a liminal universe and there is a subliminal universe. What is behind the veil, behind the scene? And so, ranging behind matter from what is called the subtle physical or sukshma sharira in Sanskrit, all the way up to the supreme lights available to us, the powers of intuition, the vaster over mental consciousness, bordering that radiant world of the supramental. This is the drift that we have. That which is undefinable has defined itself, has determined limits in the cosmos, embedded itself here. There is not a cell, there is not an atom, there's nothing to which you can point that does not have the full divinity behind it. It must be so. So, this omnipresent reality is that from which we begin, and that through which we move, and that to which we evolve. So, finite determinants, individual things, limited shapes, particularized forces, beings who populate a globe or a plane of being or all planes of being are rising in the infinite, indeterminable as an expression of an embedded conscious will. Not an accident that we are all here living on many planes at one time, or that we come and go. Some parts of us leave early, some parts of us arrive late, huh? we we're more wonderful than we ever know. Sometimes we remember as we leave the body, oh my goodness, I forgot I had this. I never used it. Much to our chagrin. And the world says, yes, we know. So we can do better. We must do better. So that's how he opens in this vast chapter, indeterminates, cosmic determinations, and the indeterminable. Chapter 2 is vaster still. He wrote this also, fresh, without referring to any other notes. And it's 44 pages long, as you can see from your table of contents. And it's called Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara. Forgive my pronunciation. Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. So obviously we're here dealing with the foundational ideas in ancient Indian philosophy. We're going to be talking about Vedanta. We're going to be talking about the still more ancient scheme of Sankhya, Purusha Prakriti, and we're going to be talking about something that came as the culmination, you might say the cream of Vedantic thinking, the concept of Ishvara and Shakti, or Ishvara, Ishwari. So this will be chapter 2. Here, Sri Aurobindo draws heavily upon the Upanishads. Really, the Veda is absent here. The Veda does not speak about these things as clearly as the formulations in the Upanishads. But the Upanishads are not all. They are in dialect. They are in a dialectic sometimes with what was being formulated as Sankhya. That would historically, once it got codified, arise later after the Upanishads. But we can see there are ideas about Sankhya available coexisting with Vedantic thought, with Vedantic spiritual experience. And finally, we get to what you could say would be the culmination in the Bhagavad Gita of a triune reality, a transcendent person who is at once spiritual but also playing in the phenomenal divided universe. Sri Aurobindo has, in a sense, in this chapter, to combine and synthesize, if I can use that verb properly, in this way. So, reality, again, is beyond affirmation and or negation. We've seen that from the indeterminable. That being is so free that even to say that it is inadequate. You can say that it is a non-being. But what it means is not an absence of being, but that which exceeds even the positive formulation of itself. So free and full is it. So, yet, it determines itself. It is self-determined to appear outside of the transcendent and inside of a cosmos which speaks about it to itself. And inside that cosmos is the living individual, the jiva. So, Sat Chit Ananda, as the one, becomes here the innumerable, and it becomes multi-leveled. It exists on all the planes Sri Aurobindo described in Book 1, the seven leading from matter all the way up to Satchit Ananda. But it is appropriately, auspiciously situated in this cosmic scheme. It is not an accident. It is a blessing of itself to itself to become this universe. It is self. It is that which we call Brahman or Atman. It is the reality of the Purusha, which is something experienced more at the individual level. Brahman is beyond cosmos and individual. It is, in a sense, absolute in itself, at least in its originating aspect. And then, of course, there is Ishvara, which is the statement, the bold recognition that this is not an accident, this is not some mere indeterminable, something that is vague, something that knows not how to be, but a person, a being who deliberately manifests, manifests as Brahman in a cosmic sense, in a transcendent sense, and manifests too as the individual, even down to the egoistic nature. Something is behind which speaks to its reality. But this self is not merely Brahman, Purusha, or Ishvara. It is also a power aspect. So if Brahman, Purusha, and Ishvara express the nature of consciousness, there is also the nature of force. And to account for the universe, this power must express itself. So when we speak about Brahman, we see that it expresses itself through Maya. We'll come back to Maya because Sri Aurobindo will have none of this idea that Maya is a cheat and a deceiver, but that Maya is that agency of consciousness which translates the infinite into innumerability, translates it from the absolute into cosmic manifestation. So this is true also when we get to Ishvara. Ishvara is personalized as the power, the mother, the divine Shakti, the Mahashakti expresses this. And this indeterminable but real being, shall we say, exists on all these planes and in all these three poises simultaneously. Now, if we are secretly that, then the challenge to us is not simply to hold one of these poises, but like the divine itself, to manifest and sovereignly live in all three poises, to be seated in the infinite consciousness of Brahman, to always be aware of the real person behind the evanescent show, the shifting personality on the front, and to be always one with the Supreme Person, of whom we are an ansha, a portion, a radiation from that sun. So that would be just an approximation of what's in chapter 2. Chapter 3 was little revised. He didn't have to work very much on this. You can go back and get the old copies of the Arya, which you can get online someplace, and compare this to that. You'll see there have been changes. But the question here is, if there is an omnipresent reality, and if there is a conscious force, which is the expression of that, and if there is this triple status of being, transcendent, universal, and individual, how does the individual persist? And the ego, Sri Aurobindo asserts, is not what we mean by the individual here. This is indeed a construct of nature, through which, by which, some secret being inside is capable of experiencing the universe through it and grasping at the experience, using the experience to draw from it the sap, and then to re-articulate itself again and again, moment by moment, life by life, to develop what is its instinct, divinity, into an immortal presence in a form. But the ego isn't that. It is the Purusha, the real person inside. And you know Sri Aurobindo will spend a great deal of time describing what that person is. But it's important. It's just tremendous that we can have the experience of Brahman and be vaulted beyond everything. You can't even say it's oceanic. It is beyond oceanic. And it's not just the cosmic consciousness. The individual is innately crucial to the idea of an emerging divinity. There can be no emergence of the divine if it cannot articulate itself in a lasting individual to carry forth the gains from one term of existence into another. This cosmos can't function in the way it's intended absent the individual awakening to the nature of its immortal center. And this conscious individual, as it grows and evolves, expresses unity at all levels of being. So that would be chapter 3. Chapter 4 is heavily revised. He went through this one and spent a lot of time on it. So we begin with the idea of a divine omnipresence at all three levels. transcendent, universal, individual, and yet we evolve towards overt divinity. The process of growth from ignorance back to knowledge is what we're talking about. And that demands effort from us. Yes, there is going to be difficulty. We're going to confront in this fourth chapter the divine and the undivine. Why is it here? What utility could this darkness, this corruptness of being, this fragmentation, this refusal to unify, to recognize, to know, why must we battle it out here? Because it's part of the cosmic game. And we find ourselves as indispensable to working this out. Part of the enginery of the universe is that it can grow only so far as its leading exponents can grow. And we, the growing souls expressing the possibility of an awakened individuality, have that as our challenge. We have to find within ourselves the solution to friction and division and unconsciousness, the denial of real being, all the doubts that assail us, and live in a grand synthesis where we're able to learn each lesson and bring them all back together in a wonderful concord, in a harmony, where all the notes are sounded and you have that you know. So this is our work. So chapter 5 continues to examine remember, the book 2 is the knowledge and the ignorance, the spiritual evolution. So he's not going to have one answer and then dash off to happy land. We're going to have to unravel all of this a little at a time, an issue at a time. So in chapter 5, he's going to again deal with negation and the contradictions that dog the physical and the vital mind and confuse the mind itself and confound all our ideals. All fails. So why not just run away into the beyond? The best we can do is escape the cosmic illusion. Um, and that is a valid perspective to Sri Aurobindo. You can do that. It is a way out, but it isn't the way of those with the greatest courage. I thought I would read something. Sri Aurobindo has such a way with words that he makes quick work of, let me just describe in his words what he's saying. Human social and political endeavor turns always in a circle and leads nowhere. Man's life and nature remain always the same, always imperfect, and neither laws, nor institutions, nor education, nor philosophy, nor morality, nor religious teachings have succeeded in producing the perfect man, still less a perfect humanity. Straighten the tail of the dog as you will, it has been said, it always resumes its natural curve of crookedness. Altruism, philanthropy and service, Christian love, or Buddhist compassion have not made the world a whit happier. They only give infinitesimal bits of momentary relief here and there, throw drops on the fire of the world's suffering. Well, I think that's sufficient. That's on page 433 in the newest version, the chapter, The Cosmic Illusion. His words wake us up. So while we can escape the cosmic illusion, we do not solve the cosmic question. And Sri Aurobindo turns next to look at the question of dreams, which people like to think that the world is a phantasmagorial dream, perhaps of a divine being who dreams us into reality. There is, after all, an Upanishad that speaks to that, and Puranas that describe in great detail lots of lovely stories. But Sri Aurobindo doesn't accept it. So the idea that the cosmic illusion, mind, dream, and hallucination describe our world order is not acceptable to him. In chapter 6, he writes a very long number of pages, 44 in fact. And did I mention that chapter 5 was itself a fresh composition from him? It did not exist in the old aria. So 5 and 6, dealing with the cosmic illusion, are fresh. And you might even say that they're historically necessary because there was criticism in the world of philosophy about his writings in the Arya in India that he hadn't given sufficient regard or paid sufficient attention to Shankara and his objections to saying that the world is real. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya was the old formula, which did dominate Indian thinking for centuries. Brahman is the truth, and the world is a lie. Sri Aurobindo says this is not Advaita, non-dualism. This is very definitely dualism. You're refusing to even look at the world, and we can't have that. So we have to find a way to synthesize, pardon me, the world and a view of the world back into Vedantic philosophy. Well, he succeeds in his articulation. Sri Aurobindo, it is apparent now, never was introduced to the Trika philosophy from Kashmir, where Abhinavagupta was its greatest exponent. If Sri Aurobindo had read him, I wonder what we would have today, because he is, like Sri Aurobindo, amazed at the vision of divine beauty as it unrolls itself throughout the world, and that there is the possibility inherent, discovering the divine here and now in a sudden explosion of consciousness, such that one experiences a transformation down to the very particles of matter in your body. It's a wonderful view. And if you decide that you want to take it up and read it, oh, just set aside 10 years for the project. But it would be worth your time. Back to Sri Aurobindo here. Chapter 6, Reality and the Cosmic Illusion. Reality is one without a second. Ekam advitiyam. So where does illusion come from? Where could it come from? If there is only one, how could this idea of an illusion apart from a reality occur? How does Shankara arrive at this? Shankara posits Maya as the culprit. But to Sri Aurobindo, Maya has to be redefined. And illusionism has to be qualified. There might be a qualified illusionism in that when we look at the world, we don't directly see the eminent divine inside of it, but it is there. But that's different. You might use the word ignorance more usefully there than illusionism. It is a kind of ignoring what is there. more than it is being fooled. One just doesn't see wholly. Sri Aurobindo notes that there is a conflict that remains unstated in Shankara's position in Advaita Vedanta, which is why he offers what we would call Purna Advaita, Purna Advaita, the full non-dualism. There is no separation. Interestingly, Shankara didn't even get the message when he was reading the Upanishads, because we, very near the beginning of our chants on Sunday, Purnam Araha, Purnam Inda. That is full, this is full. In other words, the transcendent and the universal are the same. They are not different. So that would be chapter 6, a long one. I've just touched on one or two of its main themes. In chapter 7, the knowledge and the ignorance are in front of us. And here we look at the 7 planes again in one being's manifestation. And if it is limited, it is self-limited. It has a purpose in ignoring some part of itself to establish a process, and through that process to recover knowledge and full being and delight. Here comes in the play of Leela. We do this for the sport, for the delight of it. And while there seems to be suffering on the surface, remember, there is nothing here which does not partake of the essential being of Atman, of Brahman, who is not a manifestation of Purushottama. Nothing is lost. No one is lost. The form is set down, as all forms must be set down, set aside, so that you can get a new form. So our process is to recover full being and full delight in full knowledge. And that would be chapter 7, the knowledge and the ignorance. Chapter 8, and I'll end soon because I know I'm running out of time, is memory, self-consciousness, and the ignorance. And the point here is that the wholeness of being cannot be captured in the process of memory. But memory is important to us because it's a tool by which we thread continuity. We begin to piece together through our experience a story worth telling, a story worth remembering. But it is always only a part, and it's not the whole of what we are, not the whole of what we experience. How much do we forget? Most. But we remember core elements of our story, which are important to us and important to our growth. In chapter 9, he moves on to look at memory, ego, and self-experience. And memory and ego are markers, you might say, to contain, to configure, to press forward the developing soul's experience. They are part of our toolkit. There comes a point where we can outgrow the use of a tool and go on to a better, and we should when we can. When we don't need a strong ego in the vital, well, we outlive it, develop a sattva-sized vital being, and get along in harmony with everyone. When we're no longer ferociously defending our own ideas and can marshal ours and combine them with others, then we can live synthetically in a larger vision, and so gain access eventually to the radiances that lie above the mind. So these tools are not permanent, but they are processive. We need them for now. We begin by building knowledge with our sense mind. The manas goes out and contacts sensory objects with its various senses, brings them back, organizes it into something, presents it to buddhi, the intelligent will, which then says, I think this is this and this is that, and then begins to understand the nature of the cosmos in front of it, what Prakriti does, how it works. This is a step towards self-knowledge. Eventually, buddhi does become enlightened by ceasing to insist on its view of things and recognizes the Purusha behind it. Always was present, just wasn't seen. So the hidden self comes forward always as the answer, level by level. The real body is not this physical sheath in which we sit. It's the sukshma sharira. It's the subtle one of which this is a projection, et cetera, as we climb from plane to plane. So, but we're aiming towards an encompassing knowledge, an integral knowledge in the mature soul, you can say, when it has become sovereign of all the rooms in its mansion, then it's ready to move. So I think at chapter 10, knowledge by identity and separative knowledge, we're weaving together here with Sri Aurobindo what begins as separative knowledge with the higher knowledge by identity. And we incorporate in that process all the subliminal worlds. Now, Sri Aurobindo in this chapter will talk about four kinds of knowledge. Knowledge by identity, that's the best. And then by direct contact, second best. Knowledge by separation, third best. And completely separative, not so good. So I know that I've cheated you out of a lengthier description, but we have reached, I think, a point where we'll press pause and resume next week with chapter 11, The Boundaries of the Ignorance. By the way, chapters 8 and 9, Memory, Self-Consciousness, and the Ignorance, and Memory, Ego, and Self-Experience were little revised by Sri Aurobindo. Didn't have to do a lot of work on that. When we come back to chapter 11 next week and chapter 12, the boundaries of the ignorance and the origin of the ignorance, those are reworked heavily. So we'll spend some time on that. I hope you feel like we're making rapid progress. So our section in Savitri, completing something that we have begun on page 486, the book of yoga, the parable of the search for the soul. Towards the top. Thus man in his little house made of earth's dust grew towards an unseen heaven of thought and dream, looking into the vast vistas of his mind on a small globe dotting infinity. At last, climbing a long and narrow stair, he stood alone on the high roof of things and saw the light of a spiritual sun. Aspiring, he transcends his earthly self. He stands in the largeness of his soul, newborn, redeemed from encirclement by mortal things, and moves in a pure, free, spiritual realm, as in the rare breath of a stratosphere. A last end of far lines of divinity. He mounts by a frail thread to his high source. He reaches his fount of immortality. He calls the Godhead into his mortal life. All this the Spirit concealed had done in her. A portion of the mighty Mother came into her as into its own human part. Amid the cosmic workings of the gods, it marked her the center of a wide-drawn scheme, dreamed in the passion of her far-seeing spirit to mold humanity into God's own shape and lead this great, blind, struggling world to light, or a new world discover or create. Earth must transform herself and equal heaven, or heaven descend into earth's mortal state. But for such vast spiritual change to be, out of the mystic cavern in man's heart, the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms and stand uncovered in that nature's front and rule its thoughts and fill the body and life. Obedient to a high command, she sat. Time, life, and death were passing incidents, obstructing with their transient view her sight that must break through and liberate the God imprisoned in the visionless mortal man. The inferior nature born into ignorance still took too large a place. It veiled herself and must be pushed aside to find her soul. End of Canto 2. Dear friends, good to be with you. Thank you for coming. Much love to you from here in Pensacola. I look forward to seeing your radiant faces, at least digitally, this time next week, uh, and some even sooner. All the very best to you. Namaste. Jai Ma. Hmm.